In 1859, John Taylor published The Great Pyramid. Why was it built? And who built it? He was the first person to notice that the very simple 14:11 ratio inherent in the basic proportions of the pyramid revealed to an extraordinary degree of accuracy pi and phi. In the century and a half since Taylor launched this most significant quest to prove that the Giza builders had prior knowledge of higher mathematics, Egyptologists still deny there's anything more than coincidence involved. But in a moment, you're going to see for the first time that this seventh wonder of the ancient world has no less than 12 of the most important mathematical constants embedded within its basic proportions: the diagonal, the base, the half base, the side slope, the height, and the corner slope. Now, I'm using just the basic units generally acknowledged to be the original measurements the builders used in royal cubits: 220 half base, 440 base, 280 height. With these basic numbers, the side angle is inevitably 51.843, and these other measurements all follow simply by applying Pythagorean theory. Now, don't panic. I'm well aware that many people have the following reaction when confronted with mathematics. But I'm going to spare you for now. Everything you're going to see is documented in minute detail on a dedicated YouTube channel, so the true nerds amongst us can triple-check the math to their heart's content. The rest of us can relax, just enjoy the ride. So let's get into it. Here's the square root of 2. It's the only one that doesn't involve any proportion beyond the base, so by definition it's 100% accurate. Here's where we find pi. If we add these two diagonals, we get the Euler-Mascheroni constant. It wasn't discovered until 1734. What happens when you invert that? Square root of 3. This is square root of 6, square root of 5. Here's Brun's constant, not discovered until 1919, hugely significant in the field of prime numbers. Here's the Fibonacci constant, derived from a variant of the Fibonacci series. Here's the inverse of the golden ratio, phi minus 1. And here's phi itself from the Fibonacci series. Now, if we take the base and then divide by that phi, we get E times 100, close to 4 decimal places. And finally, here's E minus 1. Utterly unsuspected today of being of any special importance, yet to our purpose right now, it's the most profoundly impactful of all 12. Why? Well, here are the two proportions that produced the E minus 1 ratio, followed by another sequence of proportions in purple. You don't have to do the math, just hold your breath, because the ratios of these proportions are to an incredible 2 5,000ths of a foot and 4 5,000ths of a meter. Staggering. So the three most prominent units of measure are found intimately connected to each other in the basic proportions of the pyramid, and in the same place where we found the 12 math constants. Let's put this into perspective on a timeline from the beginning of creation all the way up to the present day. Not to scale, of course, but you get the idea. Here's where Orthodox Egyptology states that the pyramid was built, 4th dynasty, and here's where some of us believe is more realistic, around 13,500 years ago. I want you to ask yourself, which came first, the constants or the pyramid? Well, the very definition of a constant is that it stays the same for all time, right? At the moment creation comes into being, there's duality. The constants must exist. Is the circle's circumference ever going to change in relation to its diameter? No. Okay, the constants came first. So, is it reasonable to conclude the pyramid might have been built precisely as it is in order to preserve knowledge of these important mathematical building blocks of creation? No, not at all, says Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. Mankind hadn't even invented the wheel yet, so the Egyptians couldn't possibly have known pi. It's just
sheer luck.
Well, okay, let's grant them that argument. The angle may have been chosen purely by accident, but apparently the blueprint for the three major units of measure, the imperial foot, the royal cubit, and the French meter, is inherent, embedded in the very same proportions. Well, let's ask the same chicken and egg question. Which came first, the units of measure or the pyramid? Now, this is a little trickier. The constants have to precede everything else, but the way in which we measure those constants, that's surely arbitrary. A decision made at some point along the timeline by man himself, no? Well, we know from observation that the pyramid was certainly built with knowledge of the royal cubit, so yes, that unit of measure predates the pyramid. But as we well know, feet came much later, about here, and the meter here. And of course, Egyptologists fight relentlessly over this. They're constrained to answer that the foot and meter came after to preserve their status quo. So what to make of the fact they're all here to such an extraordinary precision? Same answer from the Orthodox camp.
Luck.
But is it really? We need to think about this some more. If we reduce the green, foot, to unity, the red measures 1.718 feet. This is actually the structure of Euler's number E, the ratio 1 to 1.718. And so the cubit is E minus 1. This is the relationship between foot and cubit. Jacob Bernoulli, in 1683, working on compound interest, discovered this formula, the same one that banks use today to calculate the interest we owe on our credit cards. 1 is the amount that we borrow, and if we're compounding at 100% interest continuously, the maximum possible owed on a loan of $1 converges to 1.718, and the total is E, 2.718, and that's the total owed to the bank. This rate of growth is inherently built into creation. It's the natural base of logarithms. The incredible thing is, this implies the foot is synonymous with the principle, the original unity, what we start with. And the cubit, the interest or growth. And it doesn't only apply to banking. It shows up in calculus, probability theory. It's used to predict population growth, or the rate of spread of an epidemic. Its inverse is the rate of radioactive decay. It's everywhere. Newton found the same thing in 1669 with this infinite series of what's called reciprocal factorials. They're on the bottom with the exclamation points. They simply mean 1, 2 times 1, 3 times 2 times 1, etc. to infinity. And this part of the series converges to 1.718, and there's the 1, unity, preceding it, exactly as in Bernoulli's formula. Haven't we always been taught that the foot was based on the average size of a human foot and the cubit on the distance from the point of the index finger to the elbow? And doesn't such an arbitrary choice sound bizarrely unscientific? Especially now that we see beyond doubt they're both based on this mathematically significant relationship, the universal constant of E. So what about the meter? By reducing it by the same ratio to match the unity foot, we discover this meter is the equivalent of 3.281 feet. Now, is there any mathematical connection between it and the cubit? Well, the French derived it from 1/10,000,000th part of the meridian of the polar circumference. At least that's based on the science of geodesy, measuring the actual size of the Earth by the inherent geometry of circles. Perhaps we should look at other reliable, consistent attributes of our planet, like the 12 hours of day and the 12 hours of night that mark the Earth's rotation, or the 12-month seasons of its yearly revolution of the sun. which gives rise to the 12-month zodiac signs of the constellations, which themselves embody a retrograde pattern far more mysterious to track, but which the ancient Vedic scriptures declare is based on a series of seasons, if you will, that take our planet through an inconceivably long cycle in multiple increments of 1,200 years each for the Iron Age, 2 times 1,200 each for the Bronze, 3 times 1,200 each for the Silver Age, 4 times 1,200 each for the Golden Age, and which altogether constitutes Plato's great year cycle of 12,000 years ascending and 12,000 years descending. The question is, do we see a reflection of such patterns anywhere here in the meter-cubit relationship? Well, if we take a circle of radius 1 meter, its circumference is 12 cubits. So 1 cubit is exactly this portion of the arc, 1/6 of a slice of pi, or pi over 6, just the way we measure angles in radians. Pi over 6 is 0.5236. If we take the cubit in feet and divide by the meter in feet, it's precisely the same. Beautiful, yes? Let's take the whole thing now. Make foot, cubit, meter the radius of our circle. The circumference now is 12 pi feet. That's to an astounding 99.9993% accuracy. Or look at just cubit meter as the radius. Let's stretch this here. That's now 10 pi feet circumference. In fact, when we make the cubit be the perfect e minus 1 meter, the perfect pi over 6, which works out to this little formula here, and the foot is perfect unity, the inherent mathematical perfection is in there between foot and cubit e, between cubit and meter pi, and it produces this. Cubit meter is exactly 5 feet, all but for a minuscule 0.00004 feet. That's to an incredible accuracy of 2/50,000th of a foot. To put that into perspective, it's roughly the size of a human red blood cell. And of course that means that all three combined is 6 feet. Now, the numbers 5 and 6 are found everywhere in sacred geometry. 5 representing the microcosm of the normal everyday life we experience on Earth, 6 representing the macrocosm, the state of being we associate with divine wisdom or our reconnection with God. And how does man attain this state? Simply by recognizing the presence of the One, the original unity, out of which the 5 of earthly existence has grown. So we see there's a stunning spiritual metaphor playing out here in this trinity of the world's predominant measuring systems. Foot, cubit, meter, simultaneously and cumulatively representing 3 different stages of growth. The foot, original unity, is mathematically connected to the cubit. Together they literally are the universal growth constant, E. The cubit, the actual amount that unity has increased, E minus 1, by growing into creation according to mathematical linear law, also grows according to mathematical circular law, intimately connecting to the meter. A perfect division of what we might call the universal cycles constant. One slice of that 12 pattern we see in all planetary growth, precisely pi over 6. Finally, the meter cubit combined doubles back onto foot in what we might call the universal 6-5 constant. It represents the ultimate spiritual growth. If you doubt such a bold statement, check out the short video on this same YouTube channel. It's called CPAC Addendum 1, Spirit Molecules. We have to really wrap our minds around this or we can easily miss it. The units of measure, the very constructs with which we've defined the constants over thousands of years in completely different cultures, turn out to be a constant themselves. 3 in 1, and directly connected to 12, there's that number again, of the world's most important constants, carved in stone, immortalized next to each other in the Great Pyramid. It rightfully deserves the name Universal Constant of Measure. And it's not surprising it has remained unknown for so long because, think about it, the world has used a combination of imperial units, feet, and the French metric system for over 2 centuries. No one saw the connection between 1 foot and 3.281 feet. Because the missing link, where the pure mathematical connection to each resides, is the biblical royal cubit, which we haven't used for millennia. So it's clear now these later dates cannot be attributed to their original discovery. These must be the rediscovery of a previous perfection. They have to predate the design and construction of the pyramid, possibly here, during the last golden age, maybe even here. It begins to look as though the units of measure are maybe as eternal as the constants themselves. So was the Great Pyramid built with prior knowledge of this mystical fact? Well, the mathematical precision of the pyramid can't be argued away as sheer luck anymore, so the Egyptologists will be forced to revert to their last bastion of retreat, their mantra of denial. Evolution doesn't happen in predictable cycles like all the other time-related patterns. It's linear. Ape, caveman, to brilliant us. It's simply not possible for the pyramid to be older than stated, because how could inferior man ever even build it? But that's where they're trapped, because exactly, how could such a sublime, perfect repository of ancient wisdom be created by, well, dumb and dumber? As for the monkeys, I was Davy Jones's musical director for 12 years, and I never once saw him whip out a slide rule. And modern man? Forget it. We couldn't do this. We still today don't know the existence of this foot-cubit-meter connection. So where does that leave us? No one on this timeline could have done it. The only alternative is builders of a far superior intelligence at a time that we have absolutely no knowledge of. Prehistory. Yet still, this being the only possible solution, it will, as always, be vehemently resisted. It is indeed difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it. Upton Sinclair. We have again, like so many truth seekers on this ancient knowledge quest, proven prior knowledge, and it will not be accepted. Because there is still that infinitesimally slim possibility that it is all, well, say it with me,
Sheer luck.
The most incredible coincidence. And why? Because there's no physical, tangible proof. A parchment, a document, something stating specifically every single detail of all that you've just seen. If we had that, the very existence of such a holy grail of a document could mean only one thing, that the otherwise unknowable knowledge it contained had been passed down from prehistory by human transmission, secretly guarded and zealously protected over countless centuries. It's just plain common sense. Such beings of superior intelligence knew that by building the Great Pyramid, its very presence would guarantee that great minds in the future would eventually focus on it accordingly and retrieve its deepest messages. But they'd also use every other means at their disposal to transmit the knowledge through secret initiatory ritual as an additional safety net, another conduit to assure survival of the sacred wisdom. Does it matter what name they went by? Knights Templar, Rosicrucians, Freemasons? Maybe we will never know the precise intricacies of the transmission, but we know enough to realize it would have been attempted. The question is, did it get through? Because if so, the discovery of just one physical document detailing such knowledge would be the ultimate incontestable proof. Game over. Well, such a document does exist. It is irrefutably genuine. I have worked for over 6 years with the most accurate digital copies of this document. In fact, everything you have seen in this presentation was discovered first in the document. It will be revealed at the 2016 Conference on Precession and Ancient Knowledge.